What would our romantic relationships look and feel like if they were at the service of our deepest needs and longings, beyond normative relational formats and identities? This is the question that accompanies Jorge Ferrer's work. An acclaimed transpersonal psychologist, Jorge has dedicated his life to the study of love, relationships, and embodied spirituality. He's the author of several books, including Love and Freedom, Transcending Monogamy and Polyamory, Novogamia Mas Allá de la Monogamia y del Poliamor, and Participation in the Mystery, Transpersonal Essays in Psychology, Education, and Religion. Having spent over 2 decades at the California Institute of Integral Studies, first as a doctoral student and then as a professor and chair of the East-West Psychology Department, Jorge is currently based in Ibiza, where he focuses on his private practice as a counselor when not facilitating retreats and workshops around the globe. In a culture where monogamy is often deemed the only acceptable relational format, I was drawn to Jorge's fresh perspectives on the topic of love and freedom. Grounded in his personal history, in this episode we explore Jorge's research aimed at transcending the binary monogamy polyamory, culminating in Jorge's coining of the term Novogamy.
When I look back, I realized, well, I think I was asking the wrong question. Like, the question is not why I want to love more than one person. The question is, why not? Why don't I want to love more than one person, and why the culture prevents us to do so with these cultural mandates?
I'm Carlota Guedes, and this is the Waking Youth Podcast. I would like to start, as I usually do, grounding things in a little bit of personal history. As I research a bit about your work and a bit about your background, I understood, and you talk a lot about this, that when you first moved to California, that was a moment of a lot of experimentation, particularly in this context of alternatives in terms of romantic relationships. And as you know, the theme and the angle of this podcast is to explore these little moments of waking up from a previous state of sleepwalking. And we also mentioned a little bit the context you were growing up in Spain. So I'm curious to explore a bit of these moments of waking up for you in the context of romantic relationships.
Sure, that's beautiful. Well, I would say that my first waking up moment was when I was walking in Barcelona with my first still girlfriend, and I was walking in Paseo de Gracia with her, it's very clear. And I was very much in love with her, and she loved me very much. It was a beautiful relationship. And then I had like this flash, like almost like a download coming into me, like saying, wow, our culture is telling me that the fact that I love this woman so deeply and I'm in this beautiful relationship, it means that I can express or receive embodied, even sensuous or sexual love from any other of the 7.8 billion people in the planet.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of a wake-up moment is like, what's going on? What's going on that we limit ourselves in that way, you know? And that was the beginning of many decades of exploration. Of course, when I shared those concerns or that with my friends and family, almost everybody told me like, what's wrong with you? Like, there's something wrong. I call that like polyphobia later.
Yes.
That kind of like sense that like, if you deviate from mononormativity, like from like the default monogamous kind of like set up, then suddenly you're pathologized or stigmatized in some ways. And then I went into psychotherapy. It's like, well, what's going on with me? And only many years later, when I moved to California, of course, and also before even, I met a couple that they were living this kind of like open relationship, and I engaged in a relationship with them that was highly spiritual. They were very evolved, emotionally intelligent, spiritually awake, and so for me, the entry into polyamory was very different. Was like very special, and then I went to California, and then I learned about the term polyamory, and so many people were experimenting this. And then in my most poly phases, and later maybe we can talk later about this, also have phases that were more monogamous or even celibate. But in much more poly phases, like when I look back, I realize, well, I think I was asking the wrong question. Like the question is not why I want to love more than one person. The question is why not?
Yeah.
Why don't I want to love more than one person, and why the culture prevent us to do so with these cultural mandates?
Mm-hmm. And what do you think? Like, I think it's interesting, you know, because when we are younger, sometimes we don't have even the language to talk about certain things. So I'm curious about what already back then do you think was that impulse towards exploring polyamory and later on other alternatives?
Yes. Well, basically, when I had this kind of relationship with this couple, I didn't even have the term polyamory, but it was like a really beautiful connection. It went for 3 years. It ended when I became celibate. I didn't end it in a bad way. There are some of my best friends. One of them passed away last year. But it was like something that it felt like it was very magic. It was like this woman, and there were two men who were her primary partners. So in a way, also I enter in a different way, because there is many men today that go into polyamory because they want, to have many women, and that's kind of, and there's nothing wrong with that if experience or desire from the right place. But also I feel today in the panorama in polyamory, both in the Bay Area of California, in Spain and other places, that there is a lot of distortions.
Yeah.
That people use the rhetoric of polyamory and even the spiritual rhetoric of polyamory to basically do what the men have been doing always around, like fuck around as many women as possible, sometimes even controlling them, even if they say that they are polyamorous. And they don't understand that the greatest value, spiritual value of polyamory or open relationships is not about being with many people. It's about like really supporting and even celebrating that the people you love also enjoy and celebrate with other people. And that's always like a cutting edge in a lot of the polyamorous adventures that people do today.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And where does Novogamy come in?
Well, Novogamy came out of my personal experience. Even, those two books I just published, they are based in an article I published like more than 10, 12 years ago in California, in several magazines, even Buddhist magazines and spiritual-oriented magazines like Tikkun. And that came from after that kind of like 10-year period of explorations in California, like being polyamorous and exploring all that with great or less success, when we go into uncharted territories, we need to give ourselves a lot of slack and a lot of compassion, because it's uncharted territories, so we're going to make mistakes, and that's how we learn, through trial and error. So, but those 10 years, I would say, overall, they were very successful. They opened up beautifully and had really beautiful open relationships with different people. And then after some point, I realized when I also entered a period of celibacy for 3 years and like a calling of my energies to go inward. And I didn't know when would end it. It wasn't like a mental vow, like I want to become celibate to become spiritual enlightened. My energies went inside and they reawakened in a different way after 2 years and 8 months, more or less. And after that time, I realized, I've been living this poly life for most of my young adulthood, and it's like, what's there in monogamy for me? So I was very curious. So for the next 10 years, the 3 most important relationships I had, about 3 years each, and they were strictly monogamous. And then at some point during this exploration, I realized, I don't feel either poly or mono. I feel I have the freedom to live both types of relationships without serious fears or conflicts. And therefore, I already felt like that was kind of like beyond the binary. And then I started exploring in this article, in the books, what's the territory that exists beyond that monogamy polyamory dichotomy, in the same way that the transgender movement did with gender. This is something that I tell in my talks, because for people, it helps them to understand. 10 years ago, you were male or female, right? There was no other option. And then the transgender movement and transgender scholars and practitioners, they have taught us, like through their experience, that there is a tremendous territory in between and beyond, and like integrating values for male and female. So that's part of what I'm doing with this term Novogamy, like mapping the territory that exists beyond that binary.
Mm-hmm. I have to say that as I was preparing for this episode and I ran into your work a few months ago, I've been talking to people about Novogamy, and the fact that the word implies this idea of new, it brings a lightness that really helps the conversation. Because if I say polyamorous, that I'm exploring polyamory, even intellectually, there's a bit of a resistance. But to Novogamy, because, particularly the younger generations who are questioning a lot of things in this meta postmodernist phase that we are, they're open to exploration, but there's still a lot of the heritage of the traditional and serial monogamy. So they think it's wrong. Ethically, that is wrong. And Novogamy also, it's not only the new, it invites the co-creation, that with each partner, with each lover that you have, you both create something that makes sense for you. And I appreciate that newness a lot.
Exactly. And I want to make two comments around the term that, as you know from the books, like I'm not attached to any new term.
Yeah.
Even Novogamy includes the option that people may want to do all these kinds of explorations without identifying themselves as being Novogamous, because for some people, any new term can become a new canon, a new ideology, a new trap, conceptual trap, and they prefer not to do so. And I very much encourage that,
Mm-hmm.
But for other people to find a term, it can help them to say, oh, wow, this is what I'm experimenting. And now I have a term, I can speak about it. And I can't respond to that kind of oppressive question that most people experience today as increasingly oppressive. Are you monogamous or polyamorous?
Yeah.
Well, for a long time, I couldn't say, well, I'm neither of them. It depends on my moment, depends on who I meet, depends on my developmental stage, depends of many, many factors. So the term Novogamy, hopefully, my hope is that it helps people in that regard.
Mm-hmm.
But the other caveat is that all terms have problems, and Novogamy, in a way, kind of it creates another binary with old, new, old, and there's a caveat that I'm very aware of, very mindful of, and of course that's not the intention. I get out of my way, as you know, to make the case very strongly that in the same way that being transgender is not better or worse than being male or female, in the same way that being transracial is not better or worse than being Asian or African American. Yeah. To identify as Novogamous is not better or worse. It's not a new hierarchy. This is very important. The whole point, what we're aiming here for, is about relational freedom. The freedom to co-create the romantic, sensual, intimate life that each person wants, and that can change over time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I guess that's the limitation of language. That's the beauty, that we're able to pave new ways or allow people to feel more at home through these terms, but at the same time, we keep evolving it, so we'll always find the blind spots of the terms, no?
Exactly. Every term can be deconstructed, can be critiqued, it's the conceptual map. But if it helps for some people, fantastic. And I encourage people, maybe you can create your new term that works for you, but allows you to answer that oppressive question that if you don't feel identified with monogamous or polyamorous. That's important.
Okay. Before we jump into the questions of the audience, I have two curiosities that I would very much like to explore with you. Which one to start with is the question.
I'm in your hands.
Mm-hmm. Often in Love and Freedom and the Spanish version with the new additions as well, Novogamia, you mention or you invite people to reflect about the possibility of, instead of being committed to people, we are committed to something greater. Mm-hmm. I am very curious to explore what that means to you, and how do you think perhaps that could transform even how we navigate romantic relationships or relationships in general?
Yes, that's great. Great question. Thank you. Well, there is, of course, I'm totally into, being committed to people, sometimes one of the criticisms of non-monogamy is that, these people are lack commitment. If they have real commitment, they would be really committed to one person. Well, it could be said also the other way around, that many people who are with different partners, they are actually committed to more people. The commitment could be greater. It's a different kind of commitment, so to speak. So I'm very supportive of being committed. But at the same time, I feel that when we just commit to people, and there's a beautiful, romantic, and sacred dimension to that. Mm-hmm. But we lose sight of a larger context of kind of spiritual awakening, of spiritual growth. So I would say yes, let's commit to people, but even deeper than that, we commit to the blooming of love in all its manifestations on the planet Earth. There is so much war today, even so painful. There's so much war. There is so much violence. There is so much shit going around, especially in romantic relationships. There is so much domestic violence. There is so much control. There is so much jealousy that is really sometimes leads into violence. So let's commit to love in a deeper way, that could relax those tensions, or even commit to your own spiritual development and also the spiritual development of all the people you are in connected with, either if it's one or many, So commitment to life, commitment to love, commitment to spiritual awakening, underneath the commitment to singular people, I think it's like a good tandem for a more healthier, more harmonious, less codependent, more creative, intimate relationships.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I personally find that very helpful, because sometimes my experiences with conventional monogamy, in the sense that it's default, it's not actively chosen, is that very easily, when we start thinking about even terms like jealousy, it invites very much for this competition. It's us, the couple, against everyone else that tries to get inside our house, But this new vision, it frees me to explore what that commitment to life and love and human flourishing, could mean in relationship with different people. And it's almost as if I'm discovering how to love each person that I interact with in different ways.
Exactly. That's for me one of the key things. Is each person is going to awaken different parts of yourself. If you or your audience reflect and see what each of the people that they were romantically involved in their past, awakening them, they could realize perhaps that could have been almost different persons, sexually or emotionally or socially, with different people. So that's part of what makes intimate relationships a part of psycho-spiritual growth, mm-hmm. and integral growth, because you become aware of more parts of who you are, and also you can start embracing those parts of who you are and become more holistic, become more fully who you are. The other thing that you mentioned, because you mentioned about the default monogamy, something that is also important for me to clarify. I already said this, but I'm not against monogamy per se, but I'm against socially enforced monogamy. And monogamy is enforced through a variety of legal, institutional, cultural mechanisms. Hollywood movies, pop music, lyrics, they all go around monogamy, It's search, it's failure, and so forth, And it's very tragic. I'll just give you one example that was very poignant for me. Mm-hmm. Some of the beauty of writing books is that you get letters from people that you don't know at all, and some of them touch your heart. This one touched my heart very deeply. It was from a representative or the director, I think, of this organization in the United States, but it's a worldwide organization called Husbands Out to Wives. And it's thousands of members of married men with families that at some point during their marriage, they realized that they were gay. They were wow. gay. Mm-hmm. And they don't want to leave their wives. They don't want to live their family life. And they told me, man, reading your book, it really opens up for us a language, a map that we can really engage our partners, and we're going to talk about this, the I will probably be a talk for them at some point. And so this kind of messages, when this kind of like marginal populations, I didn't even know that that organization existed.
Yeah.
Thousands of members of men. I felt so much for them, beautiful families, and then have either to frustrate themselves or cheat. And so the point, well, there is other ways to do this, and hopefully those books and these kind of programs we do will open up for this kind of more healthier conversations.
Yeah. It's intriguing that you mentioned this, because right now I'm watching the show Grace and Frankie. I don't know if you know this show.
No, I don't.
So it's two different couples that they're friends, heterosexual couples. They're friends for a lot of years. And then the two men come out to their two wives that they have been together for the last 20 years in a gay relationship. And then it's the story of how these two women deal with this, but also the two men, you know? And at the same time, the four of them are very close. They have kids. They have a shared home, holiday house that they go often. So what happens is that the two men go to one of the houses of one of the couples, the ex-couples, and the two women go to the beach house. And it's fascinating because, you know, it's very silly, you know, it's a comedy, but I think it's so refreshing to see how they're able to transcend that situation, and they are able to love each other, you know, for who they are as human beings, not because of all of these default modes of how marriages should work. You know, things did not work out, so we break up, we break our bonds. No, they try to work on their relationship. And then it goes to the point that even when, for example, like the two men are fighting, the two women are helping them, you know, heal the relationship. Yeah,
beautiful. I'll have to watch it, but I'm aware of a number of TV shows and movies that are in the last 5-10 years that have been emerging that touch these themes, you know, and I think it's like a sign that collectively the collective consciousness is kind of like really waking up also to all these possibilities, and start exploring them in social media and also like in impacting TV programs and so forth. So I think it's good news.
Yes. The other thing that I was curious about, in the book Novogamia, you even have an image that illustrates this, and you're talking about what qualifies a romantic relationship as successful or not, and you challenge a bit this judgment only on the basis of the longevity of the relationship. And in that context, you talk about the ecological, social, political, transformative aspect of the relationship as well. And, you know, if you're involved in spiritual communities and the spiritual jargon, this makes sense. But if you're not, this might be surprising. And I thought this was quite refreshing. So I'm curious about what this also means to you. How did you come up to this definition of, or this term to then judge the success of a relationship?
Yes, thank you. Well, it also comes through all my personal explorations. Actually, I have to confess that when I first felt drawn to exploring these alternative non-monogamous relationships, I had like a kind of like a half a conscious, half unconscious motivation to really explore relationships that would last longer. Because I would see like serial monogamy is the paradigm today. So so many of my friends changing partners every few years, few months, few weeks, and many of them like getting increasingly frustrated by that and so forth, you know. And but then at some point of that exploration, I started realizing like this is kind of silly because like you know, if you and I we go for dinner one day and we have this splendid dinner, right, and we then when the dinner is over, we don't say, well, the dinner was super bad because it's over. Yeah. Or we say this great performance, a great movie, and we really enjoy it, and it also gives us a lot, you know, inspiration and things like that. Then the movie is over, the performance is over, no one would say, well, that was like very shitty performance because it was over, Why do we do this without intimate relationships, So the new criteria I'm bringing forward as an invitation to explore is two different types. One is like the transformative power of this, the healing power, how much this relationship is healing me, is unblocking sexual blocks, is opening my heart, it's making me more spiritually aware, even more eco-sociopolitically aware, what are the outcomes of this relationship, So I think this kind of more transformative criteria, healing criteria, I think they're much better and much more constructive standards to evaluate if a relationship was successful or not, independently of how long it lasted. I can imagine, and I've experienced, I speak from experience, that maybe a relationship that was pretty short in time, perhaps I had like this amazing mystical erotic encounter that opened myself spiritually in a way that I had never dreamed before.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it was an encounter I had traveling in Asia, and it was less for a few weeks because then I was coming back and that was it. And why is this less successful than a relationship that lasts for 10 years, but people are like doing, it's not so transformative for the people. People are doing passive aggression, codependent. But in our culture, it's like when I was like talking about some people about like when I was in the more poly phase, the first question they would ask me is like, "Oh, how long it lasted?"
Yeah.
It's like, well, I don't know, like 2-3 years or 1 year, and then immediately you see it doesn't work,
Yeah.
And because we live in a mononormative culture, when it's monogamous relationships, it's a different answer. It's like, well, the thing is like, well, you need to work on yourself, or maybe you didn't find the right partner, you didn't find your soul mate, but no one challenges the structure of monogamy per se. So that's why I brought this criteria, and the idea is like, love transforms, it never ends. For me, I don't see relationships finishing. I see them transforming. Love changes in a different way. And I think that's much more constructive versus like, it's over, like, I don't want to talk with you. And of course, for some people, especially if the decision was not mutual, there could be a time of separations, to lick your wounds and to before you reconnect as a friend. But as we become more emotional and intelligent, I think it's already happening now that most people, they maintain friendships with ex-partners, but not long ago, it was much, much harder.
Yeah. Beautiful. I think now is the time to jump to some of the questions of the audience. Thinking of a romantic relationship between two people, let's say that one of the persons in the relationship has this or has a different vision than the other, and wants to explore perhaps something like Novogamy or polyamory or monogamy, and the other does not. What would be some of your thoughts on this situation?
Sure. It's very common. I'm a couple therapist as well, and this is one of the main reasons many couples come to see me. One of them wants to explore open relationships as not necessarily the man. Very often today it's the woman. Time has changed, people still project, it's men who want this, not women. It's totally not true, at least in my experience, in counseling experience. I think that there are different steps here. I think, of course, it's important to explore, first of all, if the person that does not want the opening, why is that? Is there fears? Is there conflicts? Is there a history also of trauma or sexual trauma, relational trauma behind, and then this could be an opportunity for this person to explore all these things and heal. That doesn't mean that once she or he heals or wants polyamory, but it means that it's an opportunity for growth. So I always paint this canvas for them, like, this is great. It's an opportunity for growth for both of you, if you are willing to. So the key is, are they willing to explore that? Because, again, because of the mononormativity and the polyphobia, normally, if people want non-monogamy, it's like, well, maybe it's like greed or sexual greed. The normal is the other thing, But well, maybe also we can invite people who are resistant to explore that. What's going on there is some deeper fears, and are fears that we can also explore together with your partner to really make sure that you feel taken care of in this exploration, because there are many ways to open a relationship. And of course, sometimes it's necessary like a period of reflection, even sometimes a period of like more autonomous separation lives, in which if they both agree, in which one person is living one thing, the other person is not, is living monogamy, and the other person is non-monogamy, and then they come back together later and they share what has been happening for them. And of course, very often I would say like depending on the level of anxiety or stress around the situation, I think like to contact like a professional, someone who, but it needs to be a professional that does not have any agenda either for pro mono or pro poly. Someone who's really attuned to what is truth for each person. In some of the couples I've seen, the outcome has been, listen, your partner really does not really want non-monogamy, and that's not negotiable. And then for you, you need to decide, do you want to still be with your partner and sacrifice this sexual diversity or this desire that you have or not? And then they need to speak. Maybe it could be like separation of some time, and then they come back together or not. So that's kind of a bit of the process, but it's important to frame everything as an opportunity for growth. And most people that come to me, they're ready for that.
And related to this, I have here the question, is society at large ready or prepared to accept a non-monogamist society?
It's a great question. I would say I would just want to put it in a context that in a way, the non-monogamy is running amok already.
Yeah.
So the statistics tell us, the amount of people that they self-define as monogamous and monogamous couples, the amount of adultery, of cheating, according to empirical studies, surveys, anonymous surveys, is tremendous. So that's already happening. So my question is society ready to do all that in a more honest and transparent way? And the challenge here is like, most of the people who cheat, I also work in my counseling practice with adulterous people who are struggling with what they are doing because they don't feel good about that. Sincere people. Of course, there is like some kind of narcissistic, sociopathic men in particular that they don't care, But minimally honest people, they would just tell them like, well, what's going on here, no? Why are you cheating? Why are you cheating? Why you don't tell your partner? And invariably they will tell me, well, I don't talk with my partner because if I tell her, two things will happen for sure. One, something of the magic that we have will get lost, of this romantic delusion, because it's a delusion because he's not being monogamous. But two, and this is the greatest fear, my partner may want to do the same, and that's not something I'm ready to assume. So people who cheat, the paradox is that they cheat not because they don't love their partners, it's because they love them. If they wouldn't love them, they would leave them, right? But of course, it's like it's not very smart. It's like a counterproductive way to go around. It's not a good strategy because most cheaters, they feel super bad about themselves. That corrodes the emotional intimacy with their partners. At the end of the day, they get caught or they confess their affairs and there's separation. So I normally, and also like to don't tell your partner that you are doing that. You're infantilizing your partner. You are not allowing your partner to have like all the full information to take her own choices in a fully informed manner. And that's very sad. And I always encourage people to move towards transparency, of course, unless There are some cases of like mental illness, for example, that kind of piece of information could create like a physical danger for the partner, maybe even suicide. Imagine like borderline personalities, things like that. And then you need to take a much more different strategy and much more cautious and be aware of the timing for that. But yeah, that's part of why people cheat. They want to do it, but they don't want their partners to do it. It's a double standard, of course. And it's very sad.
So in terms of, if I now open the space for you to share some words of experience or wisdom with the new generations who are looking for novel or freer ways to explore themselves in relationship to others, wanting to keep or maintain this integrity, do things right, what would be some of your words to them?
Yes. Well, I'm not sure if the words of wisdom is raising the bar very high. But what I would say based on my personal experience and what I have studied and all the people I've have conversations with about this for decades, is like it's super important that you really become clear about what your deepest needs are and your deepest desires are. To stay true to yourself is very important, and then be transparent, but in a candid, humble way. To approach your partner like, listen, darling, I love you so much. I want to be with you. I don't want what I'm going to tell you to break our relationship. And I'm really afraid that if I say this is going to damage something. And at the same time, I'm experimenting all this desire for sexual variety. Maybe there is some sexual fantasies that I cannot do with you because you are not into that, you are not interested. Or maybe there is something in my heart that feels like needs to explore a different dimension of my heart for a more affectionate, romantic connection without sexuality with this particular person. I have this affinity with this friend I've met, and I would love to connect with her. Just to be very humble and to place from a place of vulnerability and to space from a place of truth. And then also the other thing is I would tell all these younger generations is if you move in all those directions, you will feel more empowered about who you are in the world. And at the same time, you'll realize you have more compassion to yourself and others. You will realize that we are all work in progress, that we are changing all the time, and the vows that we make 10 years ago, we are not precognitive or omniscient. We can change, and that's okay, to change. It's part of evolution and life, and we are part of life. So the needs and desires you had 5 years ago may not be the same ones that have now or 5 years from now. So it's embracing that kind of fluidity, that kind of changing dynamism. I tell you in the book of Novogamy, one of my main messages is your inner complexity and your inner dynamism of who you are prevents that perhaps that a commitment to a particular relationship style is going to be a place of growth for you forever or completely and so forth. You need to open to life, and also the cards that life threw at you. For many people, they are happy in a monogamous relationship for even 8-10 years, and then maybe sexuality is not what it used to be, and that's one of the most common motivations for couples to come to couple counseling about their sexuality. And then maybe they meet someone that awakens those feelings. Well, life brought that into your life. What you do with that is your decision, and that needs to be an ecological decision, not just, I want to do this, I'll do it. But if you are in committed relationships, it needs to be part of a larger conversation with your partner and perhaps even from your community of friends. It's important because these conversations, they get stuck in the diet, and there they get into circles and spirals that they are not very constructive. That's why it's helpful to see a couple counselor, but also it's very helpful, perhaps even more, to share the conversation with friends. And of course, you need to be careful with who do you share it with, because otherwise you can get a lot of negative projection, certain more conservative people. So you need to be cautious about that too.
Beautiful. And our last question is, how do you, Jorge, remind yourself to not sleepwalk your way through life?
That's an interesting question, because it's about reminding myself. No, it's I would say it's like definitively like I don't know. I stayed many years in doing Buddhist practice, mindfulness practices, like 12, 15 years. And there is something of the values of Buddhism, like mindfulness, like the sense of inquiry that even though I stopped practicing Buddhism per se, they stay with me, you know? So life is a mindful adventure. Mind is an inquiry. So for me to approach life as something like really mysterious and while just inquiring together as human beings, giving baby steps to really understand what this life in this planet floating in the cosmos is about. One of my hunches is that there is something about this miracle that we call Gaia, that it's one of the few places in the cosmos, perhaps, that in which we can really integrate consciousness and matter, and also consciousness and that kind of primordial energy of life connected to our sexuality, that I say is also spiritual energy in a more kind of undifferentiated way, but where all the generative power of spirit or the mystery or whatever you want to call it is there, no? So for me, it's more like an approach to life, no? More than, sometimes I woke up and I do some meditation in the mornings. I'm not doing so well these days, but I always want to do it regularly, you know. Of course, nature, any contact with nature, it's always awakening. Every time, you know, nobody goes to nature and regrets. Why? Because nature's make us more happy, connected to that larger network of life. And that's an awakening experience itself. So I'm not sure if I have really answered your question.
You have.
You do. Okay.
Thank you, Jorge. It was a pleasure to have you here.
Wonderful, Carlota. Thank you so much for this conversation. It has been like a total pleasure, and I really hope that it serves many other people, especially to open the conversations. That's what we need at this stage of our evolution. Like, we need just to talk, to express our deepest desires and needs, you know, with vulnerability and with truthfulness, you know. I think that's the path forward, and we don't know where it's leading. We don't know where it's leading, and that's very exciting. So
we're co-creating it as we go.
Exactly.
Jorge Ferrer is an acclaimed transpersonal psychologist, speaker, and author of several books. To learn more about his work, check out the links in the description of this episode. Waking Youth is a project that you can find more about and subscribe to at wakingyouth.org, where I regularly share essays that accompany the podcast. Our theme music is composed and produced by Carlos Sierra, who also edits our episodes, and I'm Carlota Guedes. If you like this episode, please consider sharing it with someone you think might appreciate it. That's the easiest way to support the project and ensure its continuity and blossoming. Thank you for being here with us, and talk to you soon.